Welcome to Redacted Opinions, Unfiltered, Raw, and Authentic. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts alone. And now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome back to Redacted Opinions. Today, we are putting aside the theoretical and looking directly at the sharp end of the spear. Public safety isn't a passive concept. It is a fluid, high-risk environment where seconds literally dictate survival. The tragic events in Montreal's Côte-des-Neiges neighborhood have driven that reality home in the most severe way possible. The baseline facts are stark. If you've seen the video, it's freaking atrocious. It's an awful visual, a terrible tragedy. An officer and a civilian have been killed. They've lost their lives after police responded to a 911 call involving a suspect armed with what we believe to be an SKS long gun at the local hotel, and it devolved into an immediate ambush type scenario. The suspect was neutralized, but the ripple effects are just being felt across the community. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who, for those who don't know, he is very much involved with the Police 911 charity fundraiser that helps survivors of police shootings. And so I think appropriately positioned to give us some insight in terms of what would be going on right now in this type of a tragedy.
Thanks, Luke. It really is a heavy day today for the community at large and certainly for the policing community across Montreal and Canada as a whole. This has touched the whole community. You talked about my involvement in the Canada 911 Ride Foundation. I'm honored to be on the board of directors. I've been involved with them for 10 years. And what we do is that we honor the legacy of fallen emergency service workers, police, fire, and paramedic that died in line of duty. And we also support their family to the extent we can and their children with education funds. And we place AED defibrillators in the community in the name of the fallen officer so they can continue to serve their communities even in death. For those of you that aren't aware, there was a tragic incident, as Luke said, that occurred today, the 22nd of June. The facts aren't entirely known at this point, but what is known, Luke said that there was one police officer killed. There was another police officer that also shot an officer. There was a citizen who was shot. It's not clear how they were shot. There's all sorts of speculation. I'm not going to go into that. We're not going to talk about that. This took place in the Côte-des-Neiges district of Montreal. Those of you that are from Montreal would know the Côte-des-Neiges district, Côte-des-Neiges/NDG. It's near the Jewish General Hospital, a major institution. It's got a working class population. There's some upscale apartments and condos in the area. And it took place, from my understanding, in a condo development near where a major grocery store was situated. Could have been a holdup, but it doesn't appear to be. As I said, a suspect is dead, and they're identifying the person as someone from Alberta. So it really is a heavy-hearted day. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what it means to the policing community when something like this happens, or you want to get to that later?
I think let's start with the police, because they're the ones who are the most impacted directly. And just to get off my chest, some of the comments that I've seen online, and this isn't speculation, it's just talking about the general response by some people to criticize, in particular, the female officer for having shot a bystander. For someone to sit in the luxury of their home, to sit there and quarterback someone who's being approached by someone who is actively hunting them, yeah, things get crazy. And it doesn't take much to think, wow, she was probably scared out of her pants, as anybody would be. And that poor guy who just trying to look for cover or whatever he was doing startled her. And yeah, he would have turned around and popped off a few rounds in an effort to save herself. That to me seems logical and believable. And for people to sit there and say she was I've read comments where she's called a coward, or she was hiding, she ran away from the guy. People judge like that have no business being online. It's just disgusting.
It's more than disgusting. I've had the misfortune to see some raw video of things I wish I didn't see. But one thing I would say, that there is a video of the gunfire, and there's a good 10 to 20 seconds of bang. It's like you were in Afghanistan. So for some person to say something as ignorant as that, it's not confirmed that the innocent civilian was shot by the police. We just don't know. But as you said, and you're a former police officer, my wife just retired from policing 25 years. I started off for a few years in this business. You're not only scared, there are things happening you're trying to process, you're just caught off guard. So I would never second guess the actions of a police officer, because it presupposes we had time to think about this. Things just happen. And it was just tragic, the loss of life. One of the things on the press conference I heard this evening with the Minister of Public Safety in the province of Quebec was saying, asking people, but probably to no avail, there's a lot of rumor floating around of all sorts of reasons behind what happened and who's involved and things like that. He just said, don't jump to conclusions. The investigation is underway, and that's the reality. Listen, we live in a crazy world. The internet has just changed everything about how the world operates, how people communicate. People that never would have the opportunity to have any sort of an audience just 10, 15 years ago now can talk to 20,000 people in a flash. It's just the world we live in. I'm just going to say about the officers, the male officer who lost his life, the female officer, they have families, for God's sakes. There's people mourning. There's people sitting in a hospital bed wondering if their loved one's going to survive. And this stuff's out in the public media. What effing animals you must be.
That's exactly
That's
it. Just animals. You mentioned something about thousands of people knowing or getting online and making comments right away, but it tweaked something else that I think we can weave into this. It's a tragic event. It's a downer of an episode for sure, because I don't like talking about this shit. But the one thing I think we can put in here to drive it home with the listeners is that they have a role to play. As crazy as that might sound, I know when you've got an incident like that, the Montreal police basically sent out a bulletin, lockdown and shelter in place, right? Which is typically what happens in something like this, which is great because it clears the streets in theory for responders to get there as quickly as possible, right? But now as a listener, a member of the public, for the people who are sitting there quarterbacking the officers that responded, what would you be doing in this type of situation? Because that's just as important. Is there an opportunity there to be more engaged on the public side of things when these types of incidents happen? Stay out of the way, make some phone calls, open your door, let people in off the street. Is there a role that they should be aware of?
I think so. And I just want to talk about the shelter in place. And it was a big geographic area that was issued that shelter in place. And my own sister, who lives in Montreal, called me in quite a panic because unfortunately she lives right, I think, across the street from where this incident happened. I just told her, listen to what the authorities are saying. Lock your doors, don't go outside. If you recall a few years ago, the Nova Scotia massacre, where a guy dressed up as an RCMP officer and he killed a whole, I think 12 or 13 people, and he dressed up as an RCMP officer. And there's a provincial inquiry that was done, or maybe even a federal inquiry, and they ruled it was a failure of the RCMP because they failed to adequately notify the public real time of what was happening so that they could take precautions. The shelter in place that they gave was too tight, and the shooter was outside that geographical area in no time, and a lot of people died. And now you have Montreal police being criticized because they called a shelter in place too large. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. The Montreal police didn't cause this problem. The RCMP didn't cause the problem during the Nova Scotia massacre. It's people amongst us that shouldn't be allowed to be amongst us that cause these problems. And we've got to keep it there. Listen, you say what you should do. Luke is a police officer, and we studied Columbine, we studied the Dawson College shooting, we studied mass shooting incidents as security practitioners. Things are unfolding so quickly, but one thing is certain. No one knows what's happening, okay? No one knows initially. Hindsight is 2020, but when it's happening, the first responding officers are focused on stopping the threat. That's all they're focused on. And then the officers that come following and the leadership that comes following, all they're trying to do is contain and take care of everyone, the area at large, the neighborhood at large. So to ask your question, what you should do is when these things are happening, take it seriously, listen to local radio, and do what they say. And they may be overreacting, or it may be unnecessary, but they're saying that they want to lock down this area for a reason because they don't know where Buddy is. Yeah. I too have seen online and actually spoke to some people. I saw one idiot who posted on YouTube, police at the crime scene are saying, get back. This guy said, relax, he's already dead, it's over. I mean, wow. I don't know what he knew, because what he knew, no one else seemed to know. So I think people just have to listen. There's going to be a time to criticize, okay? Hindsight's 2020, we're all armchair quarterbacks, but while the bullets are flying, that's not the time.
Yeah, it's not the time. But I would add that there's more we can do. And I think that we're missing an opportunity, not just us. I think too often, it's too easy to say, police, that's a police issue, and police got to take care of it. In this incident, you've got people in those buildings around that building, right? When those officers are being shot at, Those people, if they're thinking, if they're trained, you go to Israel, man, you name a word, right? And they scout it. They know that code word means suspicious package. They're gone. They know what to do. In Canada, they'll be ticked off because they got to wait another 2 minutes for the Tim Hortons coffee. We got to change that mindset and get people to understand there's a role for them to play. Because until the officers get on scene, maybe you've got the best vantage or view of what's going on. Why aren't you getting on the phone, calling 911 and telling them, hey guys, the police officers are coming down that street. That's where the guy is. They should be going down the other street. There is a role for the public to be more actively engaged rather than saying, oh, it's a police issue. They're going to deal with it. I'm just going to lock the door. That's not enough anymore. You talk about integration, everything's becoming integrated. And with the technology we have nowadays, they were able to shut down that whole area with a text message. Why not allow that text message to go both ways? So people who receive that message and might be able to say something back can respond. That technology exists, but I don't think the conversation's happening between police and public sector.
Is our friend Lance Valcourt, retired OPP, was working on a next generation 911 system, which I think is rolling out, I think, as we speak. It just needs funding and it's going to take a few years. But if I'm not mistaken, that technology allowed that two-way dialogue where you can actually translate your video.
Do you recall how long ago that was, Brian, that we started that conversation?
15 years.
Exactly. 15 years, man.
Yeah, I know. I remember 15 years ago thinking, wow, and I think they figured it out. And then it was funding. And what amazes me is that I'm maybe going off course here, and it's not a City of Toronto thing necessarily, but we can find money to keep libraries open on a Sunday, but we can't find money to fund the next generation 911. What I was saying is that the genie's out the bottle with cell phones. Everyone is a citizen journalist, okay? So the reality is people are going to take video, and quite honestly, video is good. It helps solve crimes. I don't really understand when you take a video of a dying police officer or someone that's bleeding out and you don't give them first aid, you just stand there and take the video, but that's a whole other show that we could have. But the thing that absolutely kills me is, if you're going to take the video, okay, then don't put it on YouTube. Send it to the police. Send it to the authorities. If you need to take the video, and quite honestly, it really helps and it does make a difference. Why are you putting it out for your 1 minute of fame so someone can see their loved one die? I'm just beyond angry.
It's awful. What do you see as the impact? What I'm trying to get at, I can't imagine what a copper must feel like right now, or his family when he gets up in the morning, he's leaving for work. That might be the last time they literally, that was always in the back of my wife's mind anyway. But when you're getting officers shot at in Toronto regularly nowadays, it's not uncommon anymore. No one signed up for that. But something like this, they got to be thinking twice about what they're doing. Is it worth it? Do you see that sort of impacting the morale of the profession?
Montreal, the chief said at the press conference, I didn't realize it. It's been 24 years since they've lost a police officer. And I think Montreal's a big city, and that kudos to Montreal. But you talk about Toronto. Just in the last 12 months, okay? And again, the Canada 911 Right Foundation carefully tracks this stuff. We work with the different police associations and services across Canada. Just in the last 12 months, from June 22nd to March 31st to June 22nd, there have been 5 line of duty deaths of police officers. We just had Toronto Police. We had the OPP before that. There was an OPP officer before that, a few months before that. The Quebec Provincial Police on March 31st lost an officer, and today the Montreal Police. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we lost 5 officers in the space of about 4 or 5 months. What does it do to the police community? It devastates them at the front line, but behind every police officer, there's a family, there's kids, there's wives, there's parents. Like, I'll tell you a story of a friend of mine in Montreal back in the day. There was a shooting where an officer got killed, and his father called the police officer that was on duty, a friend of mine, called the precinct to say, is Charlie okay? They said, 1 minute, we're going to put you through to the inspector's office. And that dad, for that 1 minute, thought, oh my God, my son is dead. Every family grieves this. Every family is fearful of this. I've got family members, you as well, that are in policing. There's going to be a lot of discussions with spouses and children and parents tonight before the night shift reports for duty about why are you doing it? Is it worth it? And talking to my nephew, who's a police officer in the GTA just earlier today, he was just saying, incredible, just horrible. And this is in Toronto. He's your operation officer. This happened 500 kilometers down the road. It affects the whole community. And it doesn't just affect the police and their families, it affects the community. As I said, my sister lived in that neighborhood. She was terrified. She called me several times during the daytime. She's still scared. And in her mind, is it over? Is something more coming? It is just completely destabilizing, more than people realize.
Yeah, it scares the crap out of me. The way I see things going, police are already having a hard time with their image, and that's obviously not going to be undermined by this type of empathy. This will give them more empathy, you would think. But when you just look at all the factors that are intermingling to create this type of an environment where police are targets, an officer gets killed on duty by accident, it's one thing. It's not to downplay that, but it's an accident. But when you're intentionally targeting officers, like you talked about Halifax, that was targeting officers, and that's becoming the norm. What kind of world are we developing? What kind of world are we living in? And how are people supposed to feel safe with that kind of an environment around?
I just want to comment the targeting officers. There's a lot of rumor going around this particular case right now. Certainly you and I don't know. And I've read all sorts of things on YouTube, and I don't know what's real. I have some sources, you have some sources, but it's too soon to tell. But you see what kind of world we're living in. I was telling you before we started, in 10,000 years of human history, from when we were in the caves to the Middle Ages to the Crusades, through the 18 and the frontiers, when life expectancy was 45 years, we as a species have never had it better than we have now. Our longevity, certainly in Canada and the West, we live into our 90s. 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds are still riding motorcycles. Poverty is a problem. But even though I look at me and my circle of friends, I still go on vacation, I still eating healthy, putting on too many pounds, we have it so good. And I can't understand why there's forces in our society and amongst us that just want to destabilize everything. And how we talked a little bit about a failure of the courts, judiciary, and politicians. How we allow this to happen? It just is so unbelievable.
That's the real question. Why do they allow it to happen? Because there is no other explanation. The law, like we were talking earlier, the laws exist. They just refuse to enforce them. When guys are out on bail 3, 4, 5, 6 times, how many times does it take? How many people need to die before you give your head a shake? I don't know. I really don't, but I'm sure it's all sick and tired of it. The other thing, to your point about targeting, if you go online, actually, I saw this yesterday. There was a video on Instagram where a guy was videotaping into the police parking lot, getting a license plates. And the 2 officers come out to confront them and basically say, it was private property, you can't film into it. And the attitude, of course, I'm standing on the sidewalk, I do whatever the hell I want. And that to me is the biggest concern, that lack of respect, the lack of staying in your lane, just writing off, that's a friggin' police officer. I would never do that. In my day, my dad would beat the crap out of me if I spoke to an officer like that. And now you get kids as young as 14, 13, 12, giving that type of attitude to a police officer. What is wrong with this world? We're the parents, man.
And I think we had that officer that was injured last week in Toronto with the stolen car driven by a 12-year-old at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
And then he's getting on social media anyways, lab-based, that they fired and the kid got shot. And they're saying, why did they shoot a 12-year-old? People have to give their head a shake type thing. They weren't shooting a 12-year-old. They were shooting, the officer was pinned against the wall by the car. They were trying to neutralize the threat. They didn't know if the threat was white, black, green, red, 12 or 60. People just don't know. And you were talking about the videotape incident. I think they call them First Amendment auditors, and they're really big in the States. And there's several here in Canada. Just because you can legally do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. I can legally say that a certain community are dumb. They're not as sophisticated, or they don't belong here. That doesn't mean I should do it. People have no self-control. It's giving a bunch of kids the keys to a candy store. They shouldn't eat all the candy. They should realize that they do, they're going to get a stomachache, but they still do. We are responsible for our own actions. And I think we got to look in the mirror, each one of us, every single one of us. Even I go back to the videos that are being posted online. What are you thinking? If that was your brother, mother, father, sister lying down there, what would you think?
Give some respect, like Jesus. Okay, listen, as the investigation unfolds over the coming days and weeks, the forensic details will come to light. We'll know exactly what happened as we give it enough time. But the takeaway right now, I think, is pretty clear that security is dynamic and that these threats are adapting. And our responses, both public and private, must remain resilient, agile, and grounded in the facts. To your point, we don't know the facts yet. We haven't said anything, I think, that hasn't been publicly posted on media in this show, on this episode, certainly, because we're trying to be respectful of the fact that there's an investigation ongoing, and we don't want to jump to conclusions, because I'm sure there's going to be people out there jumping to all kinds of conclusions. So that's not where we want to go, but we do want to talk about things that matter. And I think in this case, Jesus, man, officers getting shot. If it doesn't matter to you, then you don't belong in this country. You don't belong on this planet. Every life matters. But when you put on the uniform, it takes a special type of person, and no one signs up to be killed doing that job. They're out there trying to serve society, and they don't deserve to be shot and killed for that.
I've often heard, why is the death of a police officer more important than the death of a construction worker or some other person? And it's not. Every life is sacred. But there's one thing: the death of a police officer, the performance of his or her duties, is an attack on democracy. He or she is representing us. And when you do that, you're not killing Joe the policeman or Betty the policewoman. What you're doing is you're attacking the foundations of law and order in our democracy. And people have to understand that, because if we don't have people in the emergency services, first responder community protecting us, we would have anarchy. So just think about that, okay? I'm not saying cops are perfect. I'm not saying that they don't make mistakes. I know police have been in the news a lot recently for some really nefarious things, and no one dislikes a dirty cop more than a cop. Good cop. But the reality is, we need police. We need good police. We got to get rid of bad police, but we need good police. So when you attack the police, you attack all of us, our way of life.
And that's a great place to stop it for today. Keep your eyes open, stay grounded. We'll see you guys next time on Redacted Opinions.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Redacted Opinions. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed our podcast to help build our audience. Tune in next week for another episode of Redacted Opinions.